And one day your body will be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. That's funky too. That's true for everybody. That's humanity, that's humando. But to keep it funky is to keep it truthful, to keep integrity at the center of it. And where do you find integrity these days? Truth telling with a cost. Hard to find it. Politicians, please. There's a few slices. Mark Ridley Thomas up in LA. There's a few of them around. I didn't see any on TV the other night. I can tell you that. We won't get into that right now. Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells Barnett, Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Cesar Chavez, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Jane Ann Braden, Miles Horton, he's a Vanilla brother, truth teller to the core, full of integrity, young and relatively young and slightly older students here. Will you be tied to integrity, or will you find yourself caught up just with responding to the highest bidder? That's a form of spiritual violation on the way to spiritual blackout. That's what Du Bois is concerned about. The second question, what does honesty do in the face of deception, in the face of lies, in the face of mendacity, and the ways in which lies hide crimes, and mendacity is intimately connected to criminality? We live in an age in which the lies and crimes are ubiquitous. And by crimes, I'm not talking about just the ones that are defined legally by the mainstream. There was massive crimes on Wall Street in 2008 with insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent activity, predatory lending. How many Wall Street executives went to jail? Zero. Less than the number of Negroes in the National Hockey League. But you let Jamal or Letitia get caught with a crack bag, a cocaine, or Juanita and Juan get caught, and watch the law come down on them. You see, they call that a rule of law. No, it's shot through with a tilt against poor and working folk, disproportionately chocolate. And that's just the beginning. There have been bombs dropped on hundreds of children in Yemen and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Somalia, and not a mumbling word. But a bomb of a U.S. drone kills one American, and there's a press conference that afternoon in economic compensation for the family. And I come from a tradition that says every child, no matter what color, what nation, what country, they have the same value, the same significance, the same status, the same stature. And when one child is hurt, all of us ought to be hurt. It's true. We used to say Jesus loved the little children. All the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white, they are precious in his sight. I believed it. And I'm going to be faithful unto death, too. Faithful unto death. You see, U.S. citizens get assassinated with no due process. Nobody wants to say a mumbling word. But when it comes to your house, all of a sudden you want to get militant. Where's your integrity? Where's your moral consistency? And the same is true on the race question. You got a black president, got black attorney general, got black Homeland Security cabinet member, but every 28 hours there's a black or brown person being shot by the police, and not one policeman goes to jail as a result of federal pressure. And you say, what's all that black power at the top doing if it doesn't translate down to the folk catching hell? I call that a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. West, you so hard on Obama. I love Obama. I love the truth and I love the people more than I love one individual. Don't tell me about how many glass ceilings you broke at the top if folk in the basement still catching hell and you can't say hardly a mumbling word about them. I love what Sister Michelle Obama said about the White House. She's right. The White House was built by slaves. She should have said black slaves. Because this white supremacist slavery that was at work, not just slavery in the abstract. But then what she went on to do is what? She says, but my children wake up in the White House that was built by these black slaves. I say, that's a beautiful thing, Michelle. I salute you. I'll break dance for a second. I said, but I want to remind you that at this very moment, 44% of young, precious black children live in utter poverty who are under 6 years old, which means that the descendants of those slaves who built that White House, 1 out of 2 of their precious children still living in shacks. Don't tell me just about your upper middle class children. I'm concerned about all of the children. Don't tell me about the successful Negroes walking around like somehow they peacocks. Look at me, peacocks strut because they can't fly. I don't come from a people of peacocks. I don't come from a people who brag about their success when their cousins are catching hell, when the police are hunting them down, going to decrepit schools and living in indecent housing and massive unemployment and underemployment, and you walking around looking at me navel-gazing. No, Dorothy Height taught me something different. She said, lift as you climb. She said, you better use your success for something better, bigger than you. Because life is not about being successful. It's about having a vision of greatness. And greatness has to do with he or she who is willing to serve, willing to tell the truth and bear witness and use whatever weaponry they can to make the world a better place. That's the tradition I'm talking about. That's why I've never been impressed by Alexander the Great. He was a conqueror, he was a dominator, and he was a thug. He was just smart. Because he studied with Aristotle. Let me tell you about my grandmama. She went to the 2nd grade. She was greater than Alexander because she had a love in her heart. She had a compassion in her soul. She had a wisdom that was bequeathed to her by those who came before. She wasn't so sacrificial that she didn't have a sense of herself, but she understood the will to serve, the emptying of herself that made the world better for others. That is what greatness is. That's what greatness is. In these days, if you are tied to that conception of greatness linked to integrity and decency, you are countercultural. You got to cut against the grain. I've had folk telling me now for almost 30 years, Brother West, you from the 1960s, you played out, you antiquated. This is the age of Bill Gates. It's about the Benjamins. This is the age of big cash and status and wealth. I say, no, that's idolatry in every generation. Yes, we need some wealth. Yes, we need some success. But if it's just narcissistic, if it's just egoistic, if it's just for you, if it's just for those who look like you, or some definition of your family, and you're unconcerned of what's going on the other side of town, I don't care if they're precious brown ones in East Los Angeles. I don't care if they're poor white in Appalachia. I don't care if they're poor Asian in Long Beach, Cambodia. I don't care if they're Persian in Beverly Hills. They're human beings. You keep track of them as human beings, which means you have to cut radically against the grain. Now, young folk under 30 years old, when I was your age, 1% of the population owned 21% of the wealth. Today, 1% of the population owned 42% of the wealth. What does that mean? It's a massive transfer of wealth from poor and working people to the top 1%. In the last 7 years, 95% of the income growth went to the top 1%. That's what it means to live in a society dominated by big money, by Wall Street, by hedge fund folk. Hedge fund folk don't produce anything. They just speculate on money and make more and more big money. And people become parasitic on their money because the wealth is hemorrhaged at the top. And yet working people's wages have stagnated for 35 years. Attacks on the trade union movement, attempts to outsource labor, sending labor from different parts of the world where the rates, where the wages are much lower. Where's the truth telling? We wonder why people are so confused. You look at so many of the folk following Donald Trump. I've been catching hell, and he said America's gonna be great, so let me check it out. But they just confused. And then all you gotta do is point out the scapegoats: black folk, Mexicans, Muslims, Arabs, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, bisexual, transgender, all the folk who are most vulnerable, they get targeted. That's called cowardliness. That's called cowardliness. You see? You don't have the courage to confront folk at the top. So you got the scapegoat, the most vulnerable. That's like the brother with a machismo identity, acting like he's so big and bad and come home and beat his wife. He's a coward. He's scared. He's intimidated by something, and he hasn't worked it out spiritually and morally in a positive way, so all that rage and all that anger is targeted at the most vulnerable one. That's a human thing, you all. All of us have to wrestle with that. All of us have to wrestle with it. But it is so dominant, especially at a moment in which, as my dear sister Anahita said, the despair can be overwhelming. That's why Du Bois says that third question: what does decency do in the face of insult? How do you preserve your decency when folk are treating you indecently? Callous, indifferent. The great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used to say, indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. Silence in the face of evil is a form of evil. Even when you got candidates, I'm voting for the lesser evil. Okay, I appreciate it, but it's still evil. Just tell the truth. We can agree or disagree. Just tell the truth. Young folk these days are experiencing a spiritual and a moral awakening in the form of Occupy Black Lives Matter, the movement for black lives, struggles for ecological justice, concerns about domestic violence, concern about drones, concern about national surveillance, with what Ed Snowden and others have been trying to remind us of, the ways in which our phones are under surveillance with the coordination of Google and the others and the CIA and FBI and U.S. government. Just tell the truth. So, oh, Brother West, you sound like a communist. I'm a Christian. Call me anything you want. It's not going to scare me. I'm secure in my calling. I know what I'm here to do. I'm ready to die, which means that you're a free man or a free woman. I said, oh, Brother West, what about the gangsterized world? What about the gangster? Well, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. The gangsters don't scare me. So it ought to be in your education. People coming at you this way, lying about you, trying to disempower you, trying to devalue you, trying to demean you. Don't worry about them. Keep track on your integrity. You here to do something. Get your education, not just your schooling. Use your education for self and family and others around the world. And keep in mind your grandmother and grandfather and those who came before, who tried to teach you to be a decent person with integrity before you die. Put a smile on their face from the grave. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And that's why even it's so much more than just student equity. Because it's fascinating to me how bureaucrats come up with all these different categories. 35 years ago, it was diversity. I said, what you mean by diversity? I see a whole lot of diversity in the black community, and they all black. There's a lot of diversity with our precious white brothers and sisters. And they're not really white, they pink and other things, but we know it's just a construct. It's just a social construct. We know that. What do you mean by diversity? Oh, that's what you're talking about. The vicious legacy of white supremacy. Didn't call it that. That's what you're really talking about. The systematic and chronic devaluation of black people, the attempt to convince black people we have less beauty, less intelligence, less moral character, and most importantly, the attempt to keep black people afraid and scared and intimidated so they don't straighten their backs up and tell the truth and come together and organize and mobilize. Is that what you're talking about? Oh, okay. No, I'm for that. I'm for that. Let's just be clear about it. And of course, this relates to black folk ourselves. Because you don't have to have white brothers and sisters around to see white supremacy in the souls of black people. If you believe that you're less beautiful, if you believe you're less moral, if you believe you're less intelligent, if you walking around laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't itch, if you wearing the mask just in order to get through but trying to repress all that rage inside of you so you can't be true to yourself just in order to be successful, you still dealing with white supremacy whether white folk are around or not. And that's crucial. And one of our problems these days is that we've got too many black professionals who got tremendous money, status, but they still niggerized. They still niggerized because they scared, because they intimidate, don't want to tell the truth on the job, don't want to join the movement when the poor folk getting shot, don't want to cut against the grain in the church. They still scared. That's what it is to be niggerized. People get upset with geniuses like Snoop and the others using the word all the time. I know he's from Long Beach now. Oh, I love that brother. I don't mean I always agree with him, but I love him. But you don't have to agree with folk that you love. I love Obama. I don't agree with him all the time, but I love him. Let the police mess with him. I'm with Obama against the police beating him up because it's a matter of integrity. But the question is, how do you de-niggerize yourself and de-niggerize your education so that what you have access to is a truth that unsettles you, but it also empowers you not to put others down. It's not a matter of name calling and finger pointing other folk. The easiest thing in the world is to call white folk racist. You got so many candidates, you know. I've been a black man in America 63 years. When I look in my soul, I still see deposits of white supremacy because it's an endless process. It's like a woman looking in her soul and seeing patriarchy deposited in her soul. It's still there. It's still there. And if I got white supremacy in me, when I run into my white brothers and sisters who tell me, oh, Brother West, I'm not a racist at all. I've transcended that. My parents have much work to do, but not me. I say, you better check yourself. It's not a question of being pure. It's a question of the quality of your effort against the evil inside of all of us. That's what education tied to deeper notions of equity and equality and dignity and sanctity are all about. And the last question now, end of Du Bois. He says, how does virtue meet brute force? And by virtue, he's talking about the enabling virtue, which is courage. All the other virtues are empty if you have no courage. That's why Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., who were pacifists, they hated violence, but they would always say cowardice is more evil than violence because they were courageous. And our problem these days, in a market-driven society where everybody's for sale and everything is for sale, where do you find courage to tell the truth? Courage to love beauty. Courage to love neighbor. And I'm a Christian. I try to love my enemies, but I don't do it on my own. I got a lot of grace operating. Courage to love the holy if you are religious. Students here at this grand college, you live in a culture where you are told every day by the dominant voices, the best thing in the world is to be the smartest person in the room. And Du Bois says, what will happen to young people when they become assimilated in a dusty desert of smartness and dollars? You see it on TV all the time. Just listen to the number of times the pundits use the word obviously, 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 obvious. And it's not obvious at all. We are in no argument, no evidence to do. Obviously, obviously. It makes them sound smart. And smartness translates into money. Let the phones be smart. You got to be wise. Let the phones be smart. But smart Nazis, smart white supremacists, smart male supremacists, smart xenophobes, smart folk who are thuggish, smart folk who are gangsters. Smartness has nothing to do at the deepest level with education that shapes a soul and a person who's courageous and critical and willing to bear witness to justice. Where do you find courage these days? It's hard to find. So many times our education systems have been so shaped by market forces. We used to go to our churches, my dear brother, we went to Union together. Used to go to the churches and find courage. What do you find now? Cleverness. Some of these churches you see an ATM before you see a cross. Business folk. You used to be able to go to the mosque. You used to be able to go to the synagogue, the Buddhist temple. Market, market, market. We used to see it in our music, and I'm going to end on this, even though I give a whole separate lecture on this, because I wouldn't exist without Luther Vandross, without Donny Hathaway. I wouldn't exist without James Brown. I wouldn't exist without the Hutchinson Sisters of the Emotions. I wouldn't exist without Ted Mills, the Blue Magic, and Russell Tompkins Jr., the Stylistics. I wouldn't exist without the Scottish Twins of the Whistlers. I wouldn't exist without Charles Wright or Watts on the 3rd Street Rhythm Band. I wouldn't exist without Sarah Vaughan. I wouldn't exist without Ella Fitzgerald and Carmen McRae. But what happens these days in the music? The greatest entertainer of our day, I love her deeply, is Beyonce. She's magnificent. She controls her body, she controls her money, and she probably got significant control of a genius named Jay-Z. But Beyonce's not Aretha. She's not Aretha. What are you saying, Brother West? Don't put the sister down. I'm not putting Beyonce down. She is a symbol and symptom of the cultural superficial spectacle. She got to look a certain way. She got to shake her thing a certain way. She got to do her PR work a certain way. All Aretha needs to do is step on the stage, grab the microphone, in 3 minutes she done touch your soul because she's dug deep into her own soul, empowered you, enabled you, is coming from the depths. She's a soul stirrer like Sam Cooke and Johnny Taylor and Lou Rawls. She's not just trying to stimulate your body. She's trying to get you to be a better person. That's paideia in the musical form. That's precisely what Stevie Wonder was trying to do. That's what Ray Charles was trying to do. That's precisely what Duke and Count and Lester Young and all the others were trying to do. They mastered their craft in such a way that they then offered their heart to each and every one of us, and they touched our hearts in such a way we want it to be better. We want it to be stronger. We want it to be more loving. We want it to be more courageous so that they are able in their own way of being courageous. And part of the attack on young people these days is not just an education, it's not just jobs, but if you keep that music real thin and shallow and hollow, then their souls are going to be thin and shallow and hollow, and they're not going to be able to straighten their backs up and tell the truth and organize. I used to go to a James Brown concert. Every time he come to town, that brother would go 4 hours straight, no intermission at all. And after every concert, what would he say? He'd say, I am you. I'm an extension of you. You're an extension of me. Did anybody come here to hear a song and we didn't play it? And the sister hollered in the back, you miss soul power. He said, hit it, Bootsy. Brother Green knows what I'm talking about. He knows what I'm talking about, this brilliant young brother here. That's service. He's there to perform because through performance, you authorize and create an alternative reality from the nightmares reality people are dealing with. And to get some critical distance from that reality through performance, it's a way of empowering folk to then embark on deeper forms of education and paideia. That's what we must not lose. But the challenge is this, I'm going to end on a blue note. Because anybody concerned about telling the truth and bearing witness in that last question, Du Bois, brute force, either must be willing to undergo character assassination or literal assassination. Now, martyrdom must never be the norm for everybody, but some of us must be willing to die. And if some of us are not willing to die, then you don't have a serious tradition any longer. You're just playing games. It's like saying you love your mama, and yet when it's time to be there for her, you off playing golf. That's called sentimental feeling. Ain't got nothing to do with love whatsoever. And so it is with the cause for justice. So it is with the cause of education. That's why you have to be a blues person. You have to be on intimate terms with catastrophe, but not allow catastrophe to ever have the last word. That's what the blues is. It's a personal narrative of a catastrophe lyrically expressed. See, with B.B. King, the king of the blues, says, nobody loves me but my mom, and she might be jiving too. That's the blues. The strange fruit the southern trees bear that Billie Holiday sang about, and the Jewish brother Maripol wrote the lyrics. That's a institutional catastrophe called American terrorism, Jim Crow and Jane Crow. But how did Billie sing it? With Lester Young playing in the background. How does B.B. King sing it? With a little help from Lucille, with a smile, with style, with the tradition of Ma Rainey, tradition of Robert Johnson, tradition of Lightning Hopkins and others coming through his guitar. Hope, no optimism. Optimism ain't got nothing to do with it. Doesn't matter what the evidence looks like. You decide to be a certain person anyway. And it's not a matter of having hope. It's a question of being hope. In your very life, in your work, in your witness, you attempt to spread hope, to make it contagious, even though the evidence looks negative. Because the evidence has always looked negative for black people in America, no matter how many middle-class Negroes we produce. It's always been negative for poor people all around the world. It's been negative for dollar people right now in India. It's negative for our Palestinian brothers under Israeli occupation. It's negative for even poor folk in Israel in terms of the class structure at work. It's negative everywhere you want to go. Parts of Africa, Ethiopia right now in deep crisis. Authoritarianism extending. But once you decide to opt for integrity, honesty, decency, courage, organize, connect with others, and then be hope, enact it, embody it with a smile, with sense of fun, but with a willingness in humility, not self-righteousness, to leave the world better than you found it, then you got some serious education happening. Thank you all so very much.